Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Herbst. I am president of American Jewish University in Los Angeles. Just over a year ago, the Abraham Accords were signed by the United States, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel. The accords were eventually joined by Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. The accords heralded a fundamental shift in Middle Eastern politics that have been followed by a rapid expansion and publicly announced trade, investment, tourism, and a burgeoning number of ties between Israel, UAE, and Bahrain. It's really an honor that today, to discuss the significance of the Abraham Accords, we have Ambassador Omar Saif Ghobash, the UAE's Assistant Minister for Culture and Public Diplomacy. He was formerly the UAE's ambassador to France and to Russia. In addition, he is the author of the 2017 best-selling book, Letters to a Young Muslim. Ambassador, wonderful to see you today. Thank you for joining us from Dubai.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Ambassador, before we get to the significance of the Abraham Accords, you told me you were in Dubai for a very special reason. Maybe you could tell the audience why you're posted there and what you're doing right now.
All right, well, thank you for that. At the moment, we've got the Expo 2020 taking place in Dubai, and it was meant to happen last year, of course, but due to COVID, we weren't able to accommodate the number of visitors who were planning to come. And of course, you know, there was the issue of, I think this was pre-vaccine. So we've kept the name Expo 2020, but it is obviously 2021. And this is a fantastic forum to bring together people from all over the world. Almost every single country is actually represented with their own space, their own pavilion, and it's just been absolutely fabulous. I think there's one country that has decided not to attend this year, and it was Iceland. They don't see the point. However, you know, everybody else has turned up, and it's fantastic. From a foreign affairs perspective, for me as a diplomat, it's been a boon. I get to meet 3 to 4 delegations every single day. And I think we have half of the world's presidents coming through here to celebrate their National Day at the Expo itself. And it's also a great place for other nations to come together as well. I mean, separately from the Emirates, just to meet here. And and it lasts for 6 months, which is remarkable.
Ambassador, maybe you could tell us first from your perspective, from the UAE's perspective, the significance of the Abraham Accords.
I think the significance has kind of ripened and matured over the course of the last year. Initially, because it was a very closely guarded set of negotiations, when we actually signed the peace deal in Washington, it was very remarkable. It was exciting. It changed our perception of ourselves in the Emirates, certainly, and it also, I think, shook up the Arab and the Muslim world. And of course, there are the detractors who said it was of no importance, that had always been a relationship, and these, this was nothing but some window dressing. But the reality is, it was extremely important as an act at the time. And even if we weren't in a state of war with Israel, we certainly weren't in a position where we would actually recognize any Israeli entity or state or even citizens. So the fact that we signed the deal, as I say, it overturned traditional thinking in the region, and it put it to end a taboo. And the taboo that was operating was that it was only essentially frontline states and states that bordered Israel that were allowed to have any kind of interaction, whether positive or negative. And they were the ones who would be the interlocutors, the mediators between any other states in the Arab and Islamic world and Israel. And I think what we here in the Emirates decided was that actually this didn't suit our approach to the region. It didn't suit our understanding of how to deal with, sort of friendly and unfriendly states. And that we were much better off in many different ways, actually dealing directly with Israel and the Israelis. But in a broader sense, and over the course of the last year, I think COVID was a particularly interesting way in which our relationship with Israel was tested, because as soon as we signed the peace deal with Israel, what did we do? We immediately started operating or working together on COVID, on medical technology, on work together on sort of genome analysis and and on sort of potential work in vaccines. So that was actually a really remarkable way in which we expressed the relationship. It wasn't, as many people expected, a security relationship, a weapons transfer relationship, kind of a geopolitical tie-up. This is actually much more a people-to-people peace than or the other kinds of peace that you see in the region. From my perspective, again, within the foreign ministry, to be able to see the number of agreements that we have already signed with Israel and compare, I mean, it's something like 10, avoidance of double taxation, protection of investments. There's like link-ups between chambers of commerce, stock exchange, and I think it was yesterday or the day before we announced that Emirates Airlines is going to have daily flights to Tel Aviv. These are all remarkable things. And this doesn't happen in traditional relationships. So I spent, as you may know, 10 years as a diplomat in Russia, and it took many, many years to get even the basic agreements in place, even with the best will in the world. So the fact that we've done that is, again, another kind of really significant kind of marker or signal that the relationship is a special relationship for us.
Ambassador, thank you for that comprehensive exposition. There's a lot there that I'd like to unpack. Some have said that the impetus for the Abraham Accords on the part of UAE and Israel was that countries threatened by Iran are banding together, especially given the region's evaluation that Washington is slowly leaving the region, irrespective of who happens to be president at the time. Is that a geopolitical analysis you would agree with?
It's not one that sort of pops up in daily conversation in the ministry, nor with our diplomatic friends. For all I know, there may be sort of very, very high level kind of strategic discussions like that, but that certainly hasn't filtered down to the kind of people that I speak to. This is, again, we can't control the way the United States deals with Iran, nor can we control Iranian behavior. We can continually make our concerns known. We can continually speak about, the devastation that Iranian policies have caused in a number of countries: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and we can continually draw attention to that. But at the same time, our deeper interest as a state, as the United Arab Emirates, is to maintain our sovereignty, demonstrate our own agency, that we will make friends and peace with whom we want. And we're quite happy to work with other parties as long as they understand that we need to be respected in ourselves. And that our focus, especially over the last year and a half, has been to turn away from more geopolitical kind of concerns and more the ideological concerns that have preoccupied us for the last 10 years, to focus much more on economic development. We think in the coming phase that our sovereignty and our agency will be maintained by a greater strength in terms of our economy, our resilience as an economic actor, and our interconnectivity with other states, productive, forward-thinking states like Israel. So that's another kind of reason. I think that would be a more strategic reason for us to have made peace with Israel, given its technological and intellectual power.
Ambassador, the accords were signed, shepherded by the Trump administration, which identified them as one of the fundamental accomplishments of the 4 years of that administration. Mm-hmm. Have you found American officials in the Biden administration as enthusiastic about the process?
There may have been sort of sounds, negative kind of comments in the run-up. But I think overall, they do recognize that this is actually a much deeper a much deeper relationship than may have seemed at the time that we signed the agreements under the Trump administration. So there really is a great deal, or at least we see a great deal of understanding and enthusiasm on the Israeli side, and that surely will have a positive effect on the Biden administration, in the sense that they will understand that it isn't just a one-sided agreement from the Emirates, but that there is something actually much deeper going on here.
Ambassador, you make an important point, made it several times, while we in the United States may view the Abraham Accords as fundamentally about UAE and Israel, this is part of, if you like, the grand strategy of UAE, which goes well beyond relationships with Tel Aviv. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see that evolution in UAE's foreign policy?
Well, I think it goes quite deep. I mean, it goes all the way back to September 11th. And, you know, I don't want to risk repeating myself, but I mean, I suppose it is worth acknowledging that September 11th was a big shock, not just in the United States, but also in the Emirates as well, and in the broader region. Some were shocked for positive reasons, some for negative, but we, and leadership in particular, took a deep look at what was going on within our society and within the broader Muslim and Arab worlds, and felt that the forces that were at work had been hijacked by those who had a very kind of narrow and violent interpretation of the faith. And I think, you know, it's important to note that we started working, well, we've always been very interested in working against extremists and radicals, but we also actually worked alongside the United States and other nations in Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. That was an instance of us taking a positive step, a tangible step, beyond mere words. To demonstrate our values and how we felt about these things. And then I suppose we had the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and more aggressive forms of political Islam. And our interpretation of the Muslim Brotherhood is less generous than previous American administrations' interpretation, we see them as all part of a continuum which links the Muslim Brotherhood to Al-Qaeda all the way to ISIS. These are very cult-like organizations that have, at least in the Emirates, have no space to even begin to communicate with us. And so that also was another part of it. So we're pushed to a stage where actually, instead of just simply fighting bad ideas, we need to demonstrate the ideas and the values that we actually do value and do believe in and do represent. And that then kind of developed into ideas like, you know, sort of inviting the Pope of the Catholic Church to come to the Emirates, which he did in, I think it was 2018. This was a hugely important event, not because, you know, we in some way want. It's a hugely important event because there are fundamentalist Muslims who believe that all other faiths should be ejected from the Arabian Peninsula, that no religious demonstration other than Islamic can take place within the peninsula. And for us to have the Pope, head of the Catholic Church, more than 1 billion people here and welcome, and to have a mass in Abu Dhabi was another sign that actually we will stand up for the kind of interpretation of Islam that we believe is broad and generous and accepting of the other. And so that was a key step. And then, of course, this developed into a broader idea that we believe in tolerance. And you know, in a way, we actually named the year. It became a year of tolerance. It's 2019, I believe it was. And it was exceptionally important for us to actually reflect on the idea of tolerance. And you know, we did start out 50 years ago as a tiny nation with a very, very small population, which was very homogenous. We are now a population of roughly 10 million, a large number of outsiders, people of many different countries, many different faiths. And we need to make sure that this mix, which has been economically incredibly productive for us, that this mix continues to work together and positively. And it just made us focus again on that idea of tolerance and openness.
Minister, one of the parlor games in Washington and I believe Tel Aviv is what other countries will join the Abraham Accords? Do you have a perspective on that?
My immediate reaction is I would, if I were Israeli, I would focus on the relationships that are already in place. Yeah, quantity, not quantity, perhaps. Yeah, the quality, not quantity. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much work. I mean, I would worry if everybody started signing peace deals with Israel, then all of a sudden, you know, the work that we're doing would become less significant and you know would be put on a back burner. No, let's focus on seeing the full extent of the relationship, all of the possibilities and the potential, and then you know others may want to join.
Minister, you have a fascinating background, which you talk about in your book, Letters to a Young Muslim. Your mother was Russian, your first language was Russian, you learned Arabic later, and you were a very long-standing ambassador of the UAE
Yeah.
in Moscow. What's your perspective of what Russia wants in the region?
Oh, wow. Well, firstly, my mother is still Russian. I see her on Fridays for lunch. Uh, Russian wasn't my first language. English was my first language.
Okay.
And I kept, but still, I worked in Russia as ambassador of the UAE, and it was actually very important to them that my mother was Russian and that I was comfortable with the language and that I had, you know, sort of a background in Russian literature and I had all the correct cultural references. And you know, it was absolutely fascinating. What do they want from the region? I think that they have a genuine concern about radical Islam. And that I mean that I picked up from not just my time in Moscow, but you know my reading of Russian literature. I mean, going back 300 years ago, they already had issues with you know the Caucasus and the very tough characters that come out of there. Which is actually fascinating, but perhaps not for a recorded interview. What do they want from the Middle East? I think that they're opportunistic, that they would like to maintain as many friends as possible, that there are, you know, there are small opportunities here and there. I don't think that they have any kind of ideological interest in the area. I don't think that they have any particularly hegemonic ambitions for the area. But always to maintain some footprint, some point of leverage, some say in the outcome. And also, I mean, Russia has inherited from the Soviet Union a fantastic set of Arabists and a very deep knowledge of the Arab world, and in particular the republics, and not necessarily the Gulf monarchies. And so they have these long-standing relationships with key players across the region. So again, you know, nothing. You know, so I think that they are limited in their ambition, but you know there are enough spaces left open for them by other, perhaps more significant players.
Ambassador, you write in your book movingly about how your own father was killed in a terrorist incident, and how has that, in his memory, influenced your own pursuit in public diplomacy?
In many ways, positive and negative. And I have to say that I'm in the final stages of writing a novel about his last day. It's actually just over here. The and you know, it's funny for me to be operating and to be working in the same institution that he helped build. And in some cases, to be meeting with people who were with him, 40, 45 years ago, is quite odd. And to find myself having discussions that I'm assuming he had, similar types of discussions, both mundane and sort of more elevated, is kind of odd. And well, I mean, there's an attempt also for me to separate myself from his shadow. But at the same time, it does kind of make you question, make you wonder. He died in the course of working for the state. And had he perhaps been less idealistic and less justice oriented, perhaps he would have jumped a little faster when the gunman turned up. So the question becomes, at least in the novel, being a political animal versus being an animal who is interested in broader issues of justice. And in certain cases, the political animal will survive because he is alert to dangers around him. So that's one of the ideas that I explore in the book, and it's an idea that occurs to me on a very often.
For sure. One of the other passages in the book is you talk about the kind of informal prejudices that pervaded your childhood. And you write, quote, "It was the offhand comment that a teacher would make or the playground gossip about the Jews or the Shia sect of Islam."
Yeah. Hmm.
Do you think things have changed? Are you hopeful that things are changing since your childhood?
Look, I think like any rational adult, sometimes I'm hopeful, sometimes I'm not. These are difficult things, difficult issues. I mean, these are issues that I spotted 38 years ago. And I can't believe that I'm saying 38 years ago, this is what happened. And I can still see similar things happening today. And I think if you poke around enough trying to change culture, trying to change the way people perceive issues, you'll find that it's actually, it's a long uphill slog. You're fighting stereotypes, you're fighting comfortable ideas, you're fighting bad ideas with a long heritage. And, you can get people to move away from a certain idea for a little while. But I don't know. I things certainly amongst the younger generation, there's a great deal of optimism. There's a sense that they are less attached to kind of an imagined past, and they're much more attached to a global present, which has its own dangers, of course. How do they orient themselves online and being sort of sent off to universities in Europe and the US and in some cases to the Far East as well, China, Korea, Japan. We're a small population in the UAE, and so in a sense, you think that you can manage the set of ideas that people hold. I think there's a lot of there are so many ideas now within the UAE that it's a bit of a marketplace, I suppose. The good thing is that there are more good ideas than bad ideas here. So in that sense, I'm optimistic.
When talking about the Abraham Accords before, you made a distinction, calling it a treaty or relationship that was people to people, as opposed to the top-down agreements that characterize the region. Could you expand on it a little bit more in light of that last question?
Yeah, I think, just very simply, there's a lot of curiosity. I mean, Emiratis tend to be very curious. And one of the things that we've noticed is that every time Emirates Airlines or Etihad Airlines or any of the local airlines opens up a direct route to another city, people are on it. I remember I didn't know about Los Angeles until about 5 or 6 years ago when there was a direct flight, and I thought, okay, great. So my family spent, I don't know, 5 summers there. If nobody likes transit. So Israel, of course, once things become accepted, a lot of people come out of the woodwork and say, wait a second, I want to go first. Yeah, I want to be there. I want to check it out. And to do so without fear of retribution or legal action, because there are, going back to the days of the boycott of Israel, the Arab League had passed model laws on how to treat citizens who dealt with an Israeli or indirectly with Israel. So just getting that out of the way allows a lot of people to say, okay, well, let me explore and find out. And I suppose also a number of, it's difficult to walk around hating all the time. And also, there's so many Israelis have come to the UAE. It's kind of been immediately normalized. It's something, to be welcomed.
Ambassador, your book was written pretty much at the height of ISIS when it had shockingly established a geographically defined caliphate. Its military fortunes have since declined, although still present. What's your evaluation of its threat to the region today?
To be honest, I think all of these radical groups, I really hope that I'm not called out wrong on this in the future, but there's something that their moral, intellectual, and political bankruptcy has been established again and again. There will be people who are still interested in those ideas, but the region has in a sense moved on. There's a whole new generation that has appeared and has matured in this time in the last few years. That even me personally, I mean, I used to spend all my time thinking about radicalization and extremism. And to be honest, I feel more at peace with the world. I feel more at peace with what's going on in our part of the region, even though there are incredible problems. The fact that, you know, again, the Emirates is focused on people's livelihoods, people's dignity, people's self-respect, and the ability to, you know, live out their aspirations and their potential is a sign. I think it's a great sign because it means that our own leadership has said, okay, now we can focus a little more on ourselves here within the Emirates, and we can do our best to export some of the best practices, some of the systems that we have developed that are very specific to an Arab Muslim background. And I think that's where we're really going to be pushing forward, you know, to work with our neighbors and to work with kind of more distant partners on getting things done. Of course, the Afghan question is a difficult one, but that's like a global question, not one that we could really control in any way.
Several different people have asked about how the role of the Abraham Accords in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I was wondering what your perspective is.
Yeah, look, every Arab country has a particular relationship with Palestinian leadership. These are historical relationships, and you know, some and some of them have very smooth relations, some of them not particularly smooth. I don't think at any stage we as the Emirates were planning or pretending to or claiming to solve the Palestinian-Israeli issue by signing the Abraham Accords. There was a question of halting settlements in the West Bank, and you know, that was something that we were quite proud of, but it doesn't sum up everything that we were looking at doing. And so the Palestinians, just as we are taking agency in a very forceful manner in the Emirates, vis-a-vis many of the problems of the region, not just the question of peace with Israel, we expect the Palestinians to do the same, to organize themselves, their own internal conflicts, and to present a united face that makes their own moves towards a negotiated settlement. We can't solve their problem for them.
You mentioned several times talking about the UAE generational shifts and changes in perspectives of younger generations. You see, I'll ask it both for Israelis and the Palestinians. Do you see similar generational shifts going on that are important for the region?
I honestly wouldn't be able to say because I'm not sort of directly familiar with the situation on the ground with Palestinians or Israelis. I mean, I spent 4 hours in Israel on the tarmac in Tel Aviv airport. That was all I had managed, and I haven't been able to visit the Palestinian territories at all. So yeah, it's not for me to say. But the power of technology and globalization in creating a sense that everybody has aspirations, everybody has legitimate aspirations, is very powerful. And it's something that we recognize here in the Emirates. Leadership has, we're talking about leadership that 30 years ago may not have had the same approach to, sort of the way in which people want to live their lives. Now, the rise of the individual in the Arab world, the rise of kind of an inner life, has had major effect on the way in which government policy is developed. We expect the same elsewhere.
Ambassador, several different members of the audience are very interested in what you're hearing formally or informally from other Arab leaders about their reaction to the Abraham Accords.
You'd be surprised that these things aren't necessarily commented upon directly. Yeah, these are really, really sensitive issues. So, I suppose just like in Western Europe, some people might talk about the weather instead of Brexit. Huh?
You talked about the influx of Israelis into the Emirates as airlines have been established. And I think many in Israel feel the same way as you described Emiratis, which is as soon as a new route is opened up, they're going. Yeah. What's been the reaction on the ground to that sudden influx of Israelis and I know there's a big Israeli pavilion at the expo.
Yeah.
What's been the reaction on the ground?
Well, I think it's all the reaction is a bit of surprise, a lot of kind of delight, and in many cases a readiness to sort of be friendly, be helpful, demonstrate what we regard as Emirati values of generosity and openness. So, I mean, that's definitely happening. But also, I think this is probably more important from a Jewish perspective, complete normalization. So there's no issue. You'll see a person dressed like me, and on the next table, you'll see, Orthodox Jews sitting. And also I have to say that, it's very important that it's not just a peace treaty with Israel allowing for Israelis to come to the UAE. It is normalizing the idea of Jewish orthodoxy, sort of visual kind of confirmation of Judaism. Here, nobody knows whether an Orthodox, or somebody who's wearing a kippah or is slightly more Orthodox, nobody actually knows whether they're Israeli. But we have accepted the entire gamut, so Israeli and Jewish, which is extremely important because, I do mention in my book the problem of anti-Semitism, at least from my experience growing up in the Arab world. And it's fantastic to be able to say that, people have, with contact, people have been able to put that to one side and to recognize it for a bankrupt approach to each other.
Ambassador, another set of questions. People have noted that your portfolio includes public diplomacy and are very interested in your perceptions of the value and challenges of social media.
Right.
And how you use it, how you see it as both an opportunity and a challenge.
Yeah, I'm a little analog myself, to be honest, for which I am sincerely sorry. And public diplomacy is quite a new concept in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's only been around for about 3 years. I've been involved for a couple of years. And of course, that coincided with COVID. And from my perspective, within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for me, public diplomacy is actually basically activating our embassies so that they present an image of the Emirates. So they not only present an image of the Emirates, but they actually speak to different audiences about what it is that we're doing in this country. And because I'm excited about all of the innovations that are taking place here in government and in society, I and my leaders believe that people need to know about this. So quite often the stereotype is, sort of rich Gulf Arab, fancy cars, tall buildings, oil. Of course, with what's going on in climate change and with the focus on renewable energy, we all recognize that oil's days are numbered. And so we have actually had a platform for renewable energy investment and research for the last 15 years, and that's coming out of Abu Dhabi, which holds 10% of the world's oil. So, the Emirates is about many different things. It's not just about, the fight against terrorism. It's not just about natural resources. There's a tremendous amount of going on here, and there's a lot of ambition. So that's what we try to change these perceptions about the Emirates. So it's still early days, to be honest, because it's a question of identifying topics, developing material, training your diplomats, watching them. It's almost like an experiment. You watch the diplomats, sort of come out and do talks to different audiences. One really exciting thing about it is that it has allowed traditionally quiet diplomats to take a step forward and demonstrate their talents in public speaking and communication, which has been very exciting.
Ambassador Omar Ghobash, Assistant Minister for Culture and Diplomacy of the UAE, thank you so much.